not putting it in, I'm doing the documentary.
Ladies and gentlemen, listen up. Listen up. This is the last documentary. I don't need y'all to hear us. I don't need none of y'all out here. At 8 o'clock, instead of using tour guides, they're going to be setting off some type of device that's meant to hurt your ears.
I don't think we have to do that.
So if you see somebody with earplugs, please grab some earplugs. The earplugs are over here on this table. You're going to need earplugs and tell me who knows. Otherwise, I'll ask you to hold your ears alone. Listen, look at that book. Look at that book.
You can interchange all it is.
Here, I'm going to give you one of my cards.
Oh, shit. You got to have him. You got to have him.
That would be a great thing.
I'm going to give you one of the cards too, but that's the documentary. Try to out.
Has changed tonight. They have changed our
A lot of support for the city.
I didn't know about 7
I'm going to give you the cards and you can everything on it. Okay, cool. You can call me directly. Yeah, that's fine. You can call me directly. What's your name?
Well, that's why you should get involved.
And we got the white women like story. Yeah, right.
You got the bodyguard.
And anytime you want to speak to one, go to any of the press conferences or so-called
Right there.
You had, is it Bo Beth? And Mason.
Like stay home. Stay
You almost drowned the dog over girl. What the hell? You almost drowned her. She couldn't get a whole
I
second.
still would have
You got two girl? She's trying to go. She's trying to go. You got two little contest already. Look at her. No wonder. No wonder.
Thank you.
After that night we had, since then, they don't want to work.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
His job.
Yes, she did.
You get one of these. Jump some cars, It's like jumps in your car. They'll jump in your car 4 times the battery. 90. I know it's good. Yeah. That's the plug right But it's quite convenient because I've had to use it about 5 or 6 times. That's fast. I mean, that may not be a fast turn.
All sides, you can use skateboard. You just walk with it. They got the right image. That flag right there. Hey, it's going the other way though. Hold it upside down, ain't it? Okay. I get the message here. We got the dummy brigade. Look at all the punch. Rookies. I can't believe it.
Hey,
I went from the front to the back.
hey, them folks got to move, boy. Hey, you back here tomorrow, bro?
Always.
I'll catch you, bro.
We got bottles of water over here. Okay. You take the man in my bird. Yeah. Thank you so much.
And then like watch some princess die.
Only because
Fight, fight, fight!
Sunday night, the curfew is at 8 o'clock. And if you're looking at your watches like I am, we're just a couple of minutes away from that. So far, things have been pretty calm out on the streets. Brittany Miller is out there with the protesters once again tonight, as she has been. And Brittany, we're only minutes away from the curfew. What's going on there?
We are minutes away. I'm actually on the front lines here, standing between protesters and the police. I want to give you a look around. As you can see, the clock is ticking towards 8 o'clock. This is the first night of the 8 o'clock curfew. Only a handful of protesters here. The police officers just removed the barriers here so they can get to the protesters directly. You can see the front line, as we've seen night after night. They have their riot gear on. The gas masks are on. The helmets are on. They have their suits here. They've lined up one after the other, going all the way back towards the CNN Center, where I see some tanks as well. But they are certainly ready to enforce this curfew. One thing I have not heard yet is that final warning that we usually hear right before the curfew goes into effect, where they warn the crowd that they have 10 minutes or 5 minutes to disperse, to leave this area, or else they are in violation of the city issued curfew. So again, it is 8 o'clock. I believe, let me check my phone here. It is 7:58, so we have just a couple of minutes until they enforce it. I have not heard any sort of warning. Now, last night with the 9 o'clock curfew, they didn't deploy any tear gas. What they did was they actually had a conversation, a discussion, a dialogue with one of the protesters, and the protesters, oh, here we go, the warning.
Order 2020-92, Code Section 2-181, after 8 p.m., all pedestrians shall stand or traverse on any city streets, sidewalks, or parking lots.
Okay, so that...
Refusing this person or in violation of this order and will be arrested. The time is now 7:59.
All right, that was the final warning that I was talking about. They issued it, or you just heard it, at 7:59. These protesters are still here. We have a handful that with their hands up saying Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. It doesn't look like they are going to go home. The big question is, how will Atlanta police handle this? Will they have that dialogue? Will they deploy tear gas? We've seen both over the last 8 nights. Of course, they're going to have to wait in the next 60 seconds to see what unfolds and what develops. I'm going to step out the way so we can watch it here live.
Hey, Brittany, over the last couple of nights, we have seen some leaders step forward at around this time, either protesters or police officers stepping up and calmly, making their case for the protesters to go home. You talked about that dialogue that took place last night between one of the protesters and one of the police officers. The protester saying that it was a violation of his rights, that there was even a curfew that had been put in place. Do you see any of those leaders, anybody telling the protesters, other than the police, that it's time to go?
No, I'm just looking at this officer right now, just saying, time to go home, time to go home, time to go home. And we see the people, protesters, handful of people just standing in front of officers, not listening to this officer, just saying, time to go home, time to go home. This is the last and final warning. I don't see any leader within the protesters telling other protesters to go home. As we saw yesterday, he really said you have two options, go to jail or go home. It looks like the crowd is dispersing a little bit. Officers are just saying, come on guys, please just go. Just go home, abide by the rules, follow the rules, follow the curfew, and get out of here. They're standing in between those officers and protesters right now. I do see a lot of people with cameras, so I can't say if they're protesters or not, but if you look on this corner here, there's still a lot of people here with their phones out. There's still a lot of people to my left as well. If you can go this way, Chris, you can see a lot of people on the sidewalk here. It looks like none of them are getting too far away from this intersection in order to follow those rules and adhere to that curfew. Officers are still standing here. Is it 8 o'clock? It is now 8:01, so we have passed the time. Officers have not deployed any gas. No discussions have been had, and everyone is just standing in the middle of the street still.
And Brittany, we do want to get another perspective, but while you're out there, just kind of give us a little bit of a. We're going to come back to you in just a little bit, but it does appear as though the officers outnumber the protesters, or at least a lot of those people with cameras, by far. Brittany, we're going to come back to you in just a bit. Let's head out to Adam Murphy, because he is also, I believe, in that same area right now. Where is Adam at? Okay. All right, we're just going to continue to take a look here as we are now 2 minutes into that 8 p.m. curfew. And as Brittany just mentioned, it's a very small crowd out there. A few people riding their bikes, and police right now not taking any action. Hopefully this will be similar to last night where Brittany mentioned they did just have conversations with protesters telling them, you know what, it's time to go home. And it's a little bit of an adjustment, Rick, for a lot of the people who've been out throughout the week, because certainly when the curfew started, they had, an extra hour, but police giving themselves more time to clear the streets in anticipation of this weekend and tomorrow and Sunday possibly being big nights for protests.
This curfew is in place because of events that unfolded last Friday night, exactly 1 week ago this time. And that was really the first night of protests here in Atlanta. And we saw people, we saw what started out as a very peaceful protest. Atlantans coming out, people from other parts of the country and parts of the Southeast coming to Atlanta and joining in the protests to protest against the racial injustice here in our country. But then things took a turn and got ugly, and we saw a number of police vehicles destroyed. We saw fires set. We saw protesters hurling rocks and water bottles and other items at the police force. And so it was the next day, it was Saturday of last weekend, that Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms decided to put a curfew in place. And that curfew has remained in place ever since, with the one difference being, as you just said, Tracy, that the curfew starts a little earlier tonight, 1 hour earlier. So the protesters have to clear the streets earlier than they have the last several nights. And we're going to check in with our correspondents who are fanned out around. Who are we talking to now?
Brittany. We'll go back out to Brittany Miller. She's there on the front lines, basically kind of centralized there in near Centennial Olympic Park, that intersection, not too far from the CNN Center. And Brittany, it doesn't appear that the police are moving at this moment, just kind of patiently waiting. I would imagine since the crowd is so small, similar to what they did last night, just trying to give them a little time to adjust to this before they start pushing them forward.
That certainly seems like the case. Officers have not moved an inch. They're just standing here with their shields, of course, still waiting for that next directive. You see these officers here, these 3 officers in front of me. They've been on the phone for the past few minutes, but they've also been the people talking to protesters directly saying, time to go home, time to go home, time to go home. We don't really see any protesters too close to the officers. If you can take a look around, Chris, if we can show them, they're pretty much on the sidewalks here. They've moved out to the outer corners of this intersection. There's a lot of people over here to the right with their phones out, still holding signs, some of them even in the streets. So we're one of just a handful of people that are still here after that curfew went into effect at 8 o'clock. It's just unclear what the next move is. There are no protesters close to the officers to have that conversation like we saw yesterday. But we also don't see any tear gas that's going to be deployed. Now, we'll make it clear that the gas masks are on, which is usually an indication that tear gas will be deployed, but they were also on last night, and there was no tear gas. So it's unclear what is going to happen next, and of course that is what makes a lot of people sort of have anxiety or worry or fearful, just because we don't know what's going to happen next. But of course we're all waiting patiently and anxiously to see what police are going to do. There are a lot of officers here. I actually looked, if you can see, I don't know if we can see this far back, we see even more law enforcement at the other end. So even if police officers push protesters all the way down Centennial Olympic Park, they're going to run into even more law enforcement. So protesters, the ones that are still here, the stragglers I'll call them, they are still on the street, and they will be boxed in if they try to run anywhere. So that is very interesting. Actually, all 4 corners of this intersection are blocked off right now. I'm just looking around. So they have nowhere to run, even if they do want to go somewhere.
And Brittany, I want to take you back to not too long ago. Earlier this afternoon, we were watching and walking with you as you were with protesters who, were taking several moments to kneel in the middle of the street and have moments of silence, really in reflection of the time that it took for, the time that officers had their knee on George Floyd's neck in Minneapolis there. And just, how it's been the last several days, really starting out very peaceful, and certainly you had a number of people out there today. it looks as though many of those protesters who were marching peacefully have gone home.
Yeah, so sorry, I was trying to see what police are going to do. Looks like they are preparing to make a move, and we are going to, do you want to move this way? Okay, sorry. We just want to get to a place of safety
Right.
because it looks like they are advancing. They are walking past that front line with the shields, and they are walking towards any protesters that are still here. They're fanning out right now. We see a handful of officers. They do have the zip ties or the flex cuffs, as they're called, on their sides. They do have them on their vests. They're pushing people back right now, asking them to get out of the middle of the street. Kindly, just asking them to move right now. We're watching an interaction live. They're just asking him to move. So officers have started advancing towards protesters. Again, they're having conversations, though. They're not deploying tear gas. They're not shoving people. They're not doing anything that's aggressive. They're walking up to people saying, hey, can you get on the sidewalk? Hey, can you move? This person here has her hands up. And we have about 3 or 4 officers walking towards her, asking her to get on the sidewalk as well. So this is the plan of action right now. No tear gas right now. No aggressive sort of movement from officers or even protesters. It's still peaceful. We're still having conversations. We're still having dialogue even after 8 o'clock. So this is the scene now, and I'll send it back to you guys.
All right, Brittany, we'll keep our eye on these scenes. We want to check in with Adam Murphy, who is also out among the protesters tonight. Adam, I see you right there. Tell us from your vantage point, you're not very far away from where Brittany was, but tell us what you're seeing. What are you observing right now?
Well, I'll tell you what, you have a small group, relatively small group of people that are still out here. You can see the line of law enforcement officers at Marietta and Centennial Olympic Park Drive. Curfew, we are now, let's look at the clock here, 9 minutes past the 8 o'clock curfew. And at this point in time, police are just slowly beginning to make their way out into this crowd to let them know it is past curfew and that they need to move on and go home. But we haven't seen anything that seems too disruptive at this point. I think there are a select few people that are still out here and slowly leaving the area. Police have not been overly aggressive. I think they're trying to work with them a little bit. Okay, now if we can get up into this group up here, let's listen here. We have a woman that has a bullhorn.
Right here is calling you out. You got black brothers. You got a black father. You got nieces and nephews. They killing us. We're going to be at your house, Keisha. I challenge you. You told us on the news. You told us to shut up and go home. I'm not shutting up, and I don't want to go home, but I'm not going to give you no days in jail because my voice cannot be heard if I'm incarcerated, if I'm locked down like a dog. So, Keisha, where your ass at while they out here killing us? Hey, we got a whole bunch of Atlanta police that have done killed black men right here in the city. So, like I said, Keisha,
All right, so this is a very powerful moment from a woman who is talking to others that are out here protesting and encouraging everybody to make their way home. She's not leaving without her voice being heard, though, but she is also encouraging the crowd to leave and follow the curfew guidelines peacefully. So it's a very powerful moment out here. And you'll see as everybody is making their way past Centennial Olympic Park. All right, now, let me bring you down this way. Follow me here. You can see in the distance we have the Georgia National Guard up here right in front of the Olympic rings at Centennial Olympic Park. And they're not going to let anybody pass this area. They're going to funnel them away from the city and try to get people to head to their cars or whatever transportation they came here with. And so the Georgia National Guard is down there waiting so that they can help guide the crowd. Let me tell you though, there was a really powerful moment out here a short while ago. There was some music playing and you had some of the protesters here and they were dancing with the Georgia National Guard. They were all doing the Macarena together. So I've seen some really beautiful moments out here between the peaceful protesters and the Georgia National Guard and other law enforcement that are on scene. So clearly, you know, things are in order. Voices are being heard, and it almost seems as though with these groups of people that they're coming together. There's some beautiful moments, like I said, between law enforcement, Georgia National Guard, and protesters. And everybody is clearing peacefully, so this is a really good sign that everybody's kind of following the 8 o'clock curfew and heading on out.
Hey, Adam, to your
I'm
left.
going to show you.
I don't want to interrupt
Yes,
you.
go ahead, Rick.
To your left is a construction site that has been the scene of some looting over the course of these nights of protest. Anybody causing any problems or damage around there right now?
No, in fact, that's what's great about what's going on here. We haven't seen any damage. We haven't seen or experienced any tear gas that's not been needed. No damage to the construction site over here today. And you know, the Georgia National Guard, like I said, it was so cool when they were here dancing and getting along really well with a lot of the protesters. It just gave a lot of hope. And I think that, you know, what you're seeing right here is really a sweet moment, a nice moment, because people are working together and their voices are being heard, but, you know, nobody's being hurt. We don't see anything being vandalized. Law enforcement, Georgia National Guard, they're all here, but it's very peaceful at this moment, Rick.
And Tracy, this is almost following a bit of a familiar script at this point. And you have to figure that some of these protesters is probably not their first night protesting. Some of the members of the law enforcement out there, probably not their first night protecting the protesters and the streets here in downtown Atlanta. And everybody sort of has a role to play, and it seems like on night number 8, everyone has finally, you know, gotten their parts down, and they know exactly what's expected of them and what to do come curfew time.
Yeah, it's almost a little bit of a rhythm that it goes to. Of course, tonight it being pushed up an hour early. But as Brittany mentioned, you know, the police officers kind of when the call for the curfew, when it begins, then just, you know, not too long after that is when the police start moving in and pushing the protesters out of that center street there in downtown Atlanta near Centennial Olympic Park. And Adam mentioned the National Guard. They've really been instrumental in really helping be back up for law enforcement. You know, we saw that on Saturday night, certainly, and on Sunday night as well, helping clear the crowds with the governor issuing a state of emergency and adding some 3,000 National Guard members across the state to help manage those pop-up protests that happened. And, you know, them doing the Macarena with some of the protesters there really shows a sense of unity and that we are all one. And we've seen more and more of those instances popping up throughout the week. Especially since Friday, the chaos on Friday. But since then, we've seen more moments of solidarity between law enforcement, Guards members, and protesters, you know, kneeling together, praying together, having moments of silence together, sharing hugs, and having actual conversations so that many protesters don't feel like, you know what, it's us against them. No, we are all together in this and trying to figure out a solution to make sure this does not continue to happen to people of color at the hands of law enforcement, excessive use of force that in some cases can lead to death.
Here we are on Friday night.
Hey, Tracy?
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Hey, I want to show you something really cool too. This is my phone. This is a moment I captured moments ago. Beautiful moment. This woman out here you see praying, this black woman to the right and 2 white women to the left. The woman to the right actually went over there, got down, held their hands, and they just sat there. They cried, they prayed, and I witnessed just the most incredible moment between these people. And you were talking about solidarity. This is it right here. Mm-hmm. And you know, I just when this happened, I had to give everybody a hug. It was just a really special moment. I wanted to show you that because that's what we've been. Just fills your heart and gives you so much hope.
Oh, it absolutely does, Adam. And it's one of those moments that you know was not meant for the camera. Whether you were there or not, they were going to have that moment. And that's what's so beautiful about it. is that so many people have found themselves coming together, unfortunately, over this issue, but finding that common ground and saying, yes, we are all part of one nation, and we have to make a change one way or another. This is painful growth. Rick, growth is often uncomfortable many times, and this has been uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of us, seeing our nation at this state, but we are all praying, many of us are, that we will come out of this better on the backside of it than we went into it.
Well, you're right, and I think it was difficult for all of us to watch the scenes unfolding last Friday night, 1 week ago, when we saw those protesters who really kind of morphed right before our eyes. They went from peaceful protests to violent agitators. And it's hard to know whether these were the same folks who were involved in the peaceful marches earlier in the day, or whether these were outside groups, as we've heard from some members of state law enforcement. They have said that they have intelligence that some of the people who have come in are outside agitators or aggressors, not locals, not people from this area, but rather people who have come to this area in order to make trouble. But it was very difficult to watch those scenes last Friday night. But talk about change. Every night since then, we have seen it get progressively better. We've seen the number of arrests get progressively lower until last night, when there were no arrests. That the police didn't have to arrest anybody out on the streets involved with the protesting. So there has been change right before our eyes. It's happening so slowly that you might miss it if you don't look closely enough. But it's happening so quickly, rather. But it's there. It's there for us to see. Let's go back out to Brittany Miller. Brittany, again, this is sort of what we have seen the last couple of nights, where we see a lot of law enforcement in the background and not a lot of protesters.
Pretty much, Rick. We're 20 minutes past curfew right now, and you could see a SWAT truck making a U-turn here, possibly heading out of this area. Not a protester in sight. They followed them all the way down towards the National Guard, past that construction site that we've seen night after night, and they went into the streets of Atlanta. I did just hear some police chatter that some protesters may be on the Beltline headed to Ponce City Market. That's just what I overheard as I was walking with officers up the street in downtown Atlanta. So we have to check that out. But right now, this area is completely clear. It's been cleared pretty early now for the past few nights. No tear gas deployed. It was peaceful on both sides. It's been peaceful all day. This is 1 week from day one of protests here in Atlanta, and we all remember what we saw there and how it was a completely different story. It was peaceful, and then it turned violent, but that is not the story. Several days later, here on day 8, it was peaceful throughout the day. I haven't seen any arrests, no tear gas, and just people with signs and chants walking throughout the streets. Rick and Tracy?
Yeah, Brittany, and we are hoping that continues. We're going to let you kind of keep an eye on that. We will keep our ear in the newsroom to what's happening on the Atlanta Beltline as well. Okay, we are going to, since things have quieted down, Rick, we're going to sign off for now. Brittany, we're going to check back in with you at 9 o'clock on Peachtree TV. And for Rick Volbaum and myself, we're going to end our live stream now, and make sure you join us as well at 9 o'clock for CBS 46 News on Peachtree TV.
We'll see you then. Enjoy your evening.
window has been shattered. You can see inside actually, you can see glass all over the floor. There's a wine bottle that was actually knocked off of one of the tables. The table itself has been knocked over. You can see chairs that are flipped over. Again, this is our first.
Hey, my bad.
I can move this around. Hold on. Or, okay. Are you stressed out? I'm sorry. Huh? It's not you, it's me. That type deal. Oh no, you're stressed out for the same reason I'm stressed out right now. We both got burned by the same person. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm ready when you are. You said good? Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm not rushing you. I just don't want to screw with you since I know you've got so much more to do than this. In 3, 2. Local high school athletes have had their seasons cut short, even missed out on senior night. Here at CBS 46 Sports, we want to recognize the seniors for all their hard work. Each day we're spotlighting a team with our CBS 46 Cares Senior Kudos. Today we give a shout out to the seniors from the Grady High School baseball team. Juan, Jalen, Will, and Javian, congrats to the Grady High School Knights. Your coaches and families are proud of you. Find all of the CBS 46 Cares Senior Kudos on CBS46.com. Okay, hold on. Oh. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I feel bad. Do you see it at the very bottom? All right. Want me to just count myself in?